Welcome back to Behind the Play. My name is Alex Adams, and I am joined by my friend and colleague who covers the Ottawa Senators for the Hockey News and the face of Coming in Hot podcast, Graeme Nichols. Thanks so much for taking the time and coming on.
Yeah, no problem, Alex. Appreciate you having me on, and it's always fun coming on and shooting the shit with you. So it's good to be here. I don't know if I say the face of Coming in Hot podcast though. There's those guys do.
Well,
My colleagues do a lot of good work there. So
what
can't.
what's it been like for you to? I mean, you've been around this team, for a long time as a fan, obviously in the media as well. What was going through your mind when the team clinched it, even though it was kind of a backdoor type fashion with, even though they lost the game on Tuesday night, but just making it, clinching the playoff spot and ending the 8-year drought?
Um, I just looking at the micro analysis of it. Like I didn't feel like and it was to me it was inevitable that it was going to happen. Like I think like the odds were so good for so long, and I know that there's just some people were, oh, are they going to choke and worry about losing points, not winning games, and just delaying the clinch and stuff. But it was inevitable. Like the odds of them clinching were like, oh, well over 90% for a long time. It's just a matter of time. And obviously Montreal is going on a strong run. It's a really significant game tonight in terms of them being able to clinch, possibly closing the gap on Ottawa. And there's the debate. Well, I'm sure we'll get into it at some point whether Ottawa's in a better situation being wild card one or wild card two from a seating perspective. But I'm so thrilled for the organization, and I've said this to you off
Mhm.
air so many times. Like I'm thrilled for the people who have worked for this organization for like well over a decade. We've been here for a very long time. They experienced those highs like way back when. Um, Kind of had the downturn through the Mellick years and the latter stages of his ownership tenure. And I'm just thrilled for all the people within the organization who kind of like got through that dark time and have come through the other side under Michael Andlauer. And I'm thrilled for the coaching staff that came in here, had a lot of pressure to get this team playing the right way. And I think like they have, I know like Travis Green spoke earlier this week about the 5-on-5 play dipping over the last little bit, and I'm sure we'll get into that as well over the next 40 minutes or whatever. But yeah, like I think the coaching staff has held their end of the bargain. I think the players have held their end of the bargain for all the media hoopla around Brady Tkachuk's future with the organization earlier this season in like November when the team wasn't performing well. And there was concerns about another lost season swirling the drain and his future and what another losing season could mean. Just not maybe not necessarily just to him, but like to everyone in that core. And I'm just thrilled for the guys, and you can hear it. Like you talk to the players every day. Like you hear the excitement, enthusiasm within that dressing room. I think like to a player, they're all thrilled. I like Thomas Chabot especially. I have a piece coming out about Thomas Chabot, hopefully later today. But man, like you can just hear how excited, and just the enthusiasm he has, and to do it with this group of
Mhm.
players that he's grown with over the past several years. Like it was an organic thing, and it took a lot of time, but here we are. And I think the fans, especially the fans, right? Like, when you cheer for a fan base, when you cheer for a franchise, like you're along for the ride. You don't necessarily have much control over the process or anything else. You're just, for better or worse, you kind of stick with them. And they've been asked to endure a lot here in the past, I don't know, 8 to 10, 12, 15 years. Even if you want to go back to 2003, like there's been so many highs and lows, and the lows have tended to dominate the conversation over the last 8 years. And
Mhm.
yeah, I'm just thrilled for the city, thrilled for the fans, thrilled for the players, and everyone within that organization. I'm sure you would echo
Yeah.
those thoughts as well.
Yeah. No, the one thing that kind of jumped out to me, which was almost my initial reaction, and Travis Green talked about it almost like, yeah, it's great we made it in, but like we want this to be, not just a one-off thing. We want it to be consistent and that it's not a big deal that this team makes the playoffs consistently. And that was the first thing that popped up to my mind is it really felt, okay, this is the beginning of something, not just a one-hit wonder, right? Like you look at 2017, I don't know if anyone would have predicted that the next 8 years would have gone that poorly, but it didn't feel like, oh, this team is going to be a cup contender for the next 5 years or something like that, right? And I'm not saying this team is at that point yet, but you can really see the blueprint for this team to be, making the playoffs consistently. I think in 2, 3 years, and maybe we'll touch upon it a little bit later, I think this team could really viably be in the conversation for winning the Stanley Cup. And I think you look at the young core, like all of them have taken a step. I think Tim Stützle is just an unbelievable player, 200-foot player that he really wasn't in years past, although he had been slowly molding into that. But you have your bona fide #1 center. You talked about Brady Tkachuk. His offense hasn't been as good as maybe years past, but how many overtime goals has he had this year? Look at what he did at the Four Nations. I'm not worried about him, and obviously, I don't think he's asking for a trade anytime soon. And then I think Jake Sanderson, in my opinion, has been the MVP of this team, just how good he is defensively. And now the fact that he's now producing offensively and is on pace to have the most points by a defenseman since Erik Karlsson for this team kind of says something too. And obviously, Linus Ullmark has been finally the goalie carousel seems to have finally stopped and on Linus Ullmark's chair. So I think in many ways this team, we'll see what they do in the playoffs, and we'll talk about the first or second wild card spot that they'll have and who they could match up against and what that looks like. But I think heading into the playoffs, I think this team will make a little bit of a run. Maybe they push a team to 6, 7 games in the first round, or they go to the Eastern Conference Finals. I don't think that's all out of the picture, but I think that just what's so exciting, as you mentioned, is just, you know, you've seen it. I think most Sens fans have seen it as like the pictures of fans from 2017 and how much they've aged since. And I think about going a couple games that year and how different my life is, and that just feels like a lifetime ago. And I think for fan base, it's the hope. Hope gives you either, the lack of it kills you as a fan, or the hope kind of just lets you breathe. And for so many years, from 2018 to probably 2023, the hope was just really not there. It felt like a rudderless ship, and now I think a large part due to new ownership. I think that's probably the biggest part, if we're being completely honest. And I think Steve Stalos's moves and just being a shrewd, calm, smart, um, you know, general manager making prudent choices rather than over trying to make the splashy move. I think it's all come together in a perfect storm of winning.
It is kind of weird though. Like I was talking to a colleague about this at work the other day, and then I was talking to Brendan Duval, the VP of ticket marketing for the Senators, and there's like a whole generation of Sens fan, like for people who have kids who are like 10 years old, 11, 12 years old, like they will not remember the last time this team was in the postseason. So there's like a whole generation of young Senators fans out there who's never seen success, which to me is like insane. Like I don't think about that personally because I'm older, obviously, but like there is a generation of young Sens fans that just haven't experienced playoff hockey or any winning whatsoever. So it's exciting. Like that's how you grow. You talk about growing the brand, growing everything else, and it's an exciting time of year. And like, I don't know if you noticed, but it seems like you're getting more and more kids at morning skates and practices, and like
Yep.
it's starting to pick up a little bit, and you can feel it. You can feel it around the city. Like everyone's excited for where this is going, and everyone's fired up to get this thing started. But here's a
Yeah.
question for you. And
Hmm.
I've had this conversation on Coming In Hot, and I'd like to hear your opinion on it. If the
For
Senators,
sure.
when the Senators are play their first playoff round, does it matter if it goes 6 or 7 games or four? Let's say the Senators are bounced in 4 games. Does that impact how you feel about the Senators making the postseason and it being successful in that regard? Will that
Yes.
negatively impact? Yes. So you're
Yes.
of the opinion they have to put up a fight.
Yeah, uh, maybe I shouldn't be saying this, but I am essentially a Winnipeg Jets fan, and let's just say like the last 2 years, that team had been consistently making the playoffs and has for a while, essentially with a couple, they've missed it once or twice in the last 7 or 8 years, but they've basically been shellacked in the first rounds the last 2 seasons, and the taste in their mouth, like from fans, is just like, gosh, fuck, like this sucks. Like no one comes out of it being like, oh, like we, had 110 points in the regular season. And I do think, there's obviously differences that as I mentioned, one hasn't made the playoffs in forever in the Ottawa Senators. But let's say they played the Leafs and they lost in 4 or 5 games. Do I think fans are going to be completely negative and say this was a wasted season? I don't think we can get to that point just because they haven't made it in so long. But I do think if that were to happen, if they were bounced in 4 or 5 games, there would be a really sour taste in people's mouths, and especially if it was Toronto, right? It would just, I think it would make kind of rehash or reignite what a lot of Sens fans felt in the early 2000s, which I wasn't very much privy to. I was too young to really remember, but in my opinion, it will affect it. Now, does it completely put a huge stain on everything that's happened this season? I think that's probably too strong of a way to put it, but I do think it affects how fans look at it. But if they lose in 6 or 7 games against, it looks like either Washington or Toronto, I think it won't be too bad. I think that'll make a big difference compared if they're just shellacked. But I don't believe them. I'd be very shocked if they lost in 4 or 5 games in the opening round, but you never know. It's playoff hockey.
Yeah, I guess like the one thing that they have going for them right now is like Linus Ullmark's playing at a relatively like high level, right? Like I think like he had that dip. He got injured the second game of the season against Montreal, and then he had that dip uh, when he returned from injury. And since like December, he's been pretty locked in and dialed in. I think like that's the most encouraging thing for I think for Senators fans right now is that he's healthy, he's playing well, and he's giving them a chance to win every night. And I know like the 5-on-5 goal scoring hasn't been there throughout the course of the season. It's been a point of contention all year. Travis Green doesn't like talking about it. Um, but you win close games, right? And I think the team's record in one goal games is pretty good, and they're finding a way to win.
Yeah.
And you know, since like the trade deadline, their underlying numbers are starting to crater a little bit. Like I think they're like bottom third of the league in like many shot and goal metrics. And they're finding ways to win. And I know they're like there's that old hockey adage where it's like good teams find ways to win when you're not playing bad or when you're not playing well.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to their credit, it's working. But at the same time, it's like I just want to see this team play a little bit sharper as there's only 4 games
Yeah.
left. So
And
it's a weird kind of balancing act.
the one thing I would say is, and we've talked about it off air, is that losing Brady Tkachuk, I really think hampers this team's analytics, right? And everyone goes through injuries, right? Like look at Florida, they were missing like Tkachuk, Barkov, and Ekblad, and probably someone else that I'm forgetting off the top of my head, and they completely dominated the Senators in the game. But last week, but I still think like he is probably the biggest driver of play for this team. And if you miss him for 5, 6 games, that will skew the data to some degree. But yeah, I do think it's concerning. I think Nick Jensen should be, I don't think he should play tonight. From everything I've heard and seen, I think he's definitely not 100%. He's said that to us. So there's like other mitigating factors that I think maybe explain that, but I think you're right. Like you want to be playing at least relatively good hockey. In a sense, they're winning, but are they playing well, right? Like which one would you rather have? I don't know. But I think
Winning, obviously winning.
exactly. Well,
So
yeah, sure. And I think the way they play, and I kind of tried to ask Steve Stamkos this a little bit. He didn't really answer the question, which he sometimes does, respectfully though. But I feel this team's style is way more conducive to playoff hockey than regular season hockey, right? And do I wish that this team was faster, especially in the forward group? Yes, but just heading into the playoffs, you have presumably Ridley Gregg, Nick Cousins, Brady Tkachuk, David Perron on probably all, 1 through 4 lines, right? And those are just like a pest, agitator, really, good 200-foot players for the most part. Um, and I just think this team is much better suited for that kind of 2-1 tight checking hockey, which they have been mostly winning and holding on to leads, right? Could it be better in the third period where they don't get outshot 14-5 every time they're up 2-1? Yeah. But they still seem to hold on to those games, and they seem to really thrive in those goal games where it felt like in the past 2, 3 years, it's like how many times did they lose 3-2 or 4-3 in regulation? It just felt it was always inevitable. So, um, now why is that? I think their defensive structure is much better. I still worry about how much they generate at 5-on-5 as much as their defensive play. That's what kind of concerns me. I think Dylan Cousins has taken a bit of a step back since his first like 6 or 8 games. And I think he really needs to get going for this team to be successful in the playoffs. But as you mentioned, I think I'm definitely of the opinion with Kachuk, with players, anyone that's banged up, just get them to the playoffs. Like it matters to some degree, but it doesn't make a whole lot of, dramatic difference if Cousins or sorry, if Jensen plays one game or if Kachuk plays one game. Imagine if they get hurt. I just think that's like the doomsday scenario.
Yeah, Dylan Cousins hasn't scored since that March 20th game against Colorado where they lost 5-1. And then
Yeah.
it's been, I think it's 10 games. I think it looks
Yeah.
like 10 games. So he's gone without a goal in 10 games, has 4 assists, I believe. So
Yeah.
it's not his best stretch. I think Drake Bathurst is playing really well
Hmm.
on that line. I've really been impressed with like the third line and like Pinto Greg and Amadio. I think that's potentially been Ottawa's best line over the last stretch of games, and that's something that they can put together in the postseason. That's going to be that can be a tough line, grinding line for the opposition to deal with if they put them up against the most the most skilled line of the opposition. They could give teams a hard time with that. But I think you're right. Like I think you need a lot from Dylan Cousins. Maybe that the emotions and the adrenaline from getting traded from Buffalo have worn off a little bit. Now, this is like that bit of that grind where the emotions come down, and now it's like, okay, you got to play with the structure, you got to play within the team framework, and then I'm hoping there's going to be like that playoff bump, like that extra kick that gives them that
Hmm.
more adrenaline, and he can build off that, get back to playing the physical hockey, and just I think he's had moments like I feel like he's still transitioning the puck from like blue line to blue line very well. He's doing a lot of things for the line, but it feels like his puck touches when
Yeah.
he's trying to distribute and make things happen just haven't been as sharp as they were when he first arrived. Um, but maybe that's just me nitpicking as well because I think he was playing at a really high level when he first got here. But yeah, I'm anxious. I'm anxious to see how these guys do. It's a lot of young guys going who are going to experience the postseason for the first time, and it's like, okay, how do you deal with that? Are they going to be overwhelmed in the moment? Are they going to be like almost too excited, where they're just like trying to do everything
Hmm.
and like not over trying, but I can't think of like the right word for it. But it's just like maybe
Overdoing
just
it almost.
yeah, just overcompensating maybe because they're
Yeah.
so excited just to be in that moment. But it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the players respond. I'm looking forward to see how the city rallies around these guys, and I'm really really hoping for an extended run because I think like this team's got a lot of pieces that should work in a postseason. Like you mentioned, like guys like Nick Cousins, really Greg. Like there's a lot of agitating types like Dave Perron, Michael Amadio do a lot of the small grunt work along the boards defensively to like sustain shifts in the offensive zone. I think they got a lot of pieces that can like really help them across like a long series. It's just a matter of executing and then scoring more goals than the opposition, obviously. So I think there's a lot of
Yeah.
interesting parts, but some of the injuries kind of concern me a little bit too. You alluded to Nick Jensen earlier. I think that second pairing for Ottawa is key right now. They haven't been good essentially since the new year.
No.
Like their shot metrics, expected goal data is like it's not good. It's not very good at all. And watching Nick Jansen play, he's still moving around the ice. I don't think his mobility is that negatively impacted by whatever he's dealing with, lower body injury. But him and Shabbat just aren't playing at that same level. And I think Thomas Shabbat's played some decent hockey of late. It's just it's Jensen, and unfortunately, and I like if he can't play at a high level, I worry that that's the pairing that could get exposed, playing big minutes across a long series.
Yeah, and that's the one thing where I feel like this team's forward group, even at 5-on-5, for the most part, has been pretty good. I think if Dylan Cousins, sorry, this is gonna be a rolling theme for us for the remainder of this year with the two cousins. But I think if he can return to the way he was playing the first couple of games, as you said, I think Ottawa's top nine is really good, really solid. I think you can match up against most either Toronto or Washington's top nine and feel pretty good about it for the most part. I think we'll probably talk about later, but I think there's going to be one guy that this team essentially has 10 guys that can all play in the top nine. but one will have to be shifted out for the playoffs unless someone gets hurt. Whether that be Zetterlund, whether that be Amadio, whether Greg, whoever. So that'll be one interesting thing. But I think, as you mentioned, the that Shabbat Jensen pairing, if right now, Sanderson and Zoop have been exemplary. They're out chancing teams when they're on the ice. And if I was Travis Green, honestly, I would play Jake Sanderson like 30 minutes a night. Like, why not? Like, it's 5, 6, 7 games, whatever it may be. I just think every time he's on the ice, the Senators are in such an advantageous position that and it's the playoffs. Like look at Colorado. They play McCarr like 30 minutes a night in the playoffs. Same with Hughes, right? It's finally the time of the year where that isn't you're not doing what DJ Smith did with Thomas Chabot and the Doldrum years where he was playing 30 minutes a night on a terrible hockey team, right? For no reason. The other thing I would say is also Matt Powell and Clevin. I think Clevin has been pretty good for the most part. And Matt Powell's very serviceable, big body, but that third pairing feels really worrisome for me. If you notice, like they typically start in the offensive zone, especially with the top line, which I think is an indicator that Travis Green really wants to shelter them. So I think that's where like the Achilles heel of this team is like if you can get in behind their defense, specifically Shabbat, and also that third pairing, I think that's where like if they're against Matthews or Ovechkin, like with last change, I just think that's the area where the defense is a bit vulnerable, and I think that's where we'll see if Shabbat and Jensen rise to the occasion and the third pairing as well, or do they kind of get caved in a little bit, and that's where Ottawa kind of falls to its demise.
Yeah, like I'm just looking at the expected goal data. So since like January 1st, Shabbat and Jensen are at like 44%, and then Matt and Paolo and Clevin are at 37%.
Yep.
So, and you mentioned the sheltered nature of the third pairing and how they play and then how they're rolled out and utilized. And it's yeah, it's bang on. It's just those are the vulnerabilities, right? And I think like that, the right side depth, quality of depth on the right side has been an issue all year. And I think it's only been exacerbated by injuries throughout the course of the season. Like Artem Zub was dealing with stuff. Nick Jensen's obviously dealing with the lower body thing right now. Under no circumstances should Travis Hamonic be in the lineup.
I
Um,
agree.
but like it's
If
just
but if
they're
there's an
missing.
injury, like
I think there's like if there is like a criticism, if there's a criticism of the Steve Stamkos managerial reign, it's that he didn't address the right side of the defense this past offseason because it was easily the Achilles heel of this group. And it's kind of playing out. It's kind of playing out live right now. But to in fairness to Steve, like he had a really good offseason. I think he had a really good
mhm,
year at the helm. But I think like he was a little bit hamstrung by Travis Hamonic's no move clause. But um, that's kind of a self-inflicted wound. We've had this conversation before about buyouts and
yeah,
everything else. So it's all fodder. But I think like come this offseason, one of the things I'm really hoping for though, Alex, just from like a team building
mhm,
standpoint, is
yep,
like if they can get on an extended run, win a series, put forward a good effort, and like have a really strong representation of themselves, where it's like Brady Kachuk gets a lot of attention, similar to like what he received at the Four Nations tournament.
mhm,
Or like the other young, like other pieces of the young core really stand out and play at a high level and garner a lot of like national media attention. If they could do that, I am hopeful because the cap space that the Senators will have this offseason, I think they have like 18,
18, yeah,
18 million before like you have to bring a goalie back, obviously. So it'll be a little bit smaller than that.
and
Um,
Giroux likely,
yeah, but he might come in for less, but you're right,
yeah,
that'll lead at the 18 million. But if you can go on an extended run, create a little bit of positive excitement about this core, it might attract free agents to want to come here and be like, hey,
hmm,
I want to be a part of this. I want to be a part of that. And you listen to David Perrault talk about Ottawa, you listen to Linus Ulmark talk about Ottawa, the lifestyle living here. They love it here. Like they're thrilled with the lifestyle that it offers and affords people. And I think if you have a competitive team, a good owner, strong management and leadership from the top down, I think it's going to be it should be an attractive place to play for a lot of players.
yeah. I mean, obviously, we can talk about taxes and why all the Florida teams or Vegas, in the non-tax states have been thriving of late, which I think is a real conversation and a real thing. but there's a reason why guys are flocking to Edmonton. And I'm not trying to equate Tim Stützle and Jake Sanderson to the levels of Connor McDavid or and same with Brady Tkachuk with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. But if you're a winning team with good ownership that's steady, and everything, and the team is young and teams on the cusp of doing real big things. Like, why wouldn't you want to sign in Ottawa, right? And it seems like a really good room. This is not Vancouver, right? I don't think there's a lot of kind of butting of heads. I think everyone kind of gets along, which I think is important to winning as well. And for a guy to wanting to come to know, like, hey, like, obviously I want to get my bag, but I get to be with Brady Tkachuk and Tim Stützle and all these guys that are, good teammates and everything. So yeah, I think you're completely bang on. For me, Zetterlund's kind of struggled. I still think if I were the Senators, I would extend him to like a multi-year deal, get him, maybe to his like, I don't know, 4 times 4 seems kind of reasonable to me if you're buying years of UFA. I think he's still a really good player, even though he's kind of struggled here in Ottawa a little bit. But his underlines are good. And then you have to add a defenseman and a right shot, and it's going to come with a premium. But I think that's exactly what this team needs to do. Like last year, there's like Sean Walker and Matt Roy on on that were UFAs and got big tickets. That's the type of defenseman I think Ottawa should go for. Maybe not for those contracts that Carolina and Washington splashed out, but that's the type of guy that I think Ottawa should look at in that kind of mold. And I think if you have that, you put Jensen on the bottom pair, you probably add another depth left shot defenseman. It could supplant Clevin or not, but just another body that is better than Dennis Gilbert, who no offense to him, but I think your defense looks really good. And I think the forward group is essentially going to be intact for next season. And I think you feel really good about that, especially the depth. Maybe you could have one more impact winger. I'd love this team to go after Ehlers. It's not happening, I don't think, but yeah, you never know. But yeah, to me, like I'm gonna be writing a story, I think tomorrow or tonight, about why I think the future for the Senators is like one of the best in the Atlantic Division and in the Eastern Conference. You have Tim Stützle, Brady Tkachuk, Jake Sanderson, all 25 and under on long-term contracts. Like I just that are very team friendly. I just think this team in the next couple of years is not just going to be a playoff team, but I think a cup contender in 2, 3 years from now.
Yeah, I think it's all predicated on, I think they have the pieces, like the young pieces to do it, but I think it's predicated on how do you build around that. And I think like the one thing that hinders Ottawa's position right now is draft capital in the prospect system, because I think like this would be the time where they should be like, they should have, based off 8 years of a rebuild, there should be way more draft capital. There should be way more prospects that are in the system that currently aren't. And I think that's just a structure of the predecessors, the previous regime, I should say, or Steve Sayos's predecessor. Um, and I think it's kind of hamstrung them a bit. So it's like without that capital, like they're not moving Carter Yakimchuk in a trade. Like obviously it depends. I guess it
Unless
depends.
it's,
I guess it
yeah,
depends on
but
the who's coming
unlikely.
back, but like the likelihood of that happening and bankrupting the farm system when they're kind of like in that middle category of teams is would be a huge, huge, huge gamble. But obviously it depends on what would be coming back. But I think it just makes sense for this team to add through free agency. But then the risk of free agency is that you risk overpaying players and what have you. But I think the luxury that Ottawa does have is that its young core is signed to relatively
You have
team
the
friendly
room.
deals. I think like, as the cap continues to escalate with inflation and everything else, like the salaries of all of Ottawa's young players will stay the same. And they're only going to look better as the seasons go by. And it's going to be kind of similar to what Boston enjoyed when they had guys like Pasternak and Marchand at like $5 million contracts. So
Yep.
that's the good news. And I think the other part of it too is that what's encouraging about Steve Stamkos is that he's found a way to add the right fits. And it's not necessarily a splashes guy, but like they've done a good job of targeting players who add skill sets and have talents that the roster otherwise lacks. Like you look at like David Perron, great board guy, good body positioning, can sustain shifts in the offensive end and works his ass off, goes to the dirty areas of the ice. Michael Amadio is like I talked about him being
Oh,
like a poor
he's
man's
so
Mark
good.
Stone. Just the way he like
Yeah.
strips guys of the pucks in the offensive zone, sustains shifts, works hard. And they just they're possession guys. Like they just find a way to sustain pressure and zone time in the offensive zone, and they didn't have that previously. And like you look at the guys that they've had in years past, where there's like a Dadonov or a Tarasenko. It's just strictly offensive guys who didn't add a lot of two-way play. And I think, obviously Ottawa's had their share of 5-on-5 struggles, but the guys that they've added were better fits in terms of the talent and skills that they possessed. And that's encouraging. I think like heading into this offseason, whenever it starts for Ottawa, I think like that's something that you can hope. Yeah, I think there's a reasonable hope that it should continue.
What would, in my, like, it's interesting because we're talking about like adding to the defense, but if you look at their underlying metrics defensively, they're one of the top 10, close to five teams in the league. What they've really struggled at is generating offense. Like when you think of Ottawa, you think, oh, like Kachuk, Stützle, like this team should be like a high-powered offense, and it really has. And they've even had a pretty good power play too. Like
Sure.
if you're Steos moving forward, and even in the playoffs, like why? How would you explain that in your mind that this team has been struggling offensively?
Well, I think it starts on the back end. Like we talked about, like the Shabbat and Jensen pairings, the analytical numbers, right? Like the expected goals data is like 44%. Like they're like as talented when healthy. That pairing was like Ottawa's best pairing in the first half of the year.
Oh,
In the
by
second half
far.
of the year, they're just not. And I think like you've seen like Jake Sanderson and Artem Zub play an extremely high level now that Sanderson's been rid of Hamonic on his pairing. And I think if Ottawa had Thomas Chabot and Jensen playing at their first half rates when Jensen was healthy, I think you'd say, okay, the top four is good, and that's when you're going to get more zone time, more offense that way. And then again with the Kleb and Matt and Pallett pairing, they're just spending too much time in their own end defending. And if you have two pairings that are spending way too much time in their own end defending, that's going to negatively impact your offense. And I think if you look at the first half of the year when Ottawa was more healthy, their expected goal data and the shot data was actually pretty good. It's just they
Yeah.
weren't scoring at 5-on-5. They were sunk by like I don't want to say poor luck and bad luck. I hate blaming luck. But like the reality is their shooting percentage was like one of the worst in the leagues.
It
But
still
even
is.
yeah, even though the expected goal data was really good and everything else, they're just a tad unlucky. And I think they're just right now they're just not generating enough. And I think like the injuries to Jensen, unfortunately, is a huge part of that. It's the efficiency of that second pairing that has to be better. And I think if
Mhm.
Ottawa struggles in the first round of the playoffs, I think like that could potentially be the Achilles of where it's happening.
Yeah. And you could, I mean, to be glass half full, like you've just, I mean, maybe Jensen plays tonight and plays some games. I would not. I'd be surprised if he played another regular season game before the playoffs. But we don't know. Travis Green didn't talk to us today, so that would have been a question that was asked. But in my opinion, just the fact that they clinched it and they'll give him essentially 2-ish weeks to just rest and recover, I think is going to be so huge for this group. Like, because as you mentioned, like essentially the first half of the season when Jensen was healthy, Shabbat and him were just having great underlying numbers. They were outscoring teams at 5-on-5, and every other pairing was Sanderson and Hamonic, and the bottom pair was struggling, right? And now
Yep.
that's flipped. Now Sanderson and Zub are generating a bunch. They're outscoring opponents, but Shabbat and Jensen have taken a downtick. So if you have at least a healthier Jensen heading into the playoffs, I think that's going to be a really big deal. And it's interesting. Like you talk about the ads that Steos had, and maybe not addressing the right side enough, but I think he's done a really good job. And what's interesting, like heading into the summer, and we're going to get back to the playoffs because I think we should probably talk about playing the Leafs or Washington. But the fact that he was quite frugal in a sense with his offseason spending, like he had a bit of cap space, but he just got Perron for 4 million for 2 years, Amadio for less than 3 million. Like smart ads that isn't an overpay, isn't super, kind of bankrupting in a sense this team's cap future for the next couple of years. I think that gives me some hope that even when he'll have a bit more cap space this summer, that he'll make good decisions and not just completely overpay just to bring in the guy in the door that really hampers this team's future moving forward.
I like we also talk about like the second half analytics and everything else, but it's like I think you have to recognize that when Norris and Batherson were playing together in the second half, like that line wasn't creating unless they scored a goal.
No.
Like the shifts where they didn't score a goal, they weren't spending enough time in the offensive zone. Like they were just
Not at all.
lots of one and outs. They're just having a guy who's capable of carrying the puck alongside Batherson and doing a lot of the work to get that zone time and possession. It's huge. I think you can see a huge difference in Batherson's game right now. I think like even though Cousins hasn't put up points, when he's at his best, it's a marked improvement over the alternative. And I love Josh Norris. I think he's got some skills and some talents, but
He's a
like
really
I
good
think that's
player.
yeah, I think it's just like a totally different player. Who just wasn't necessarily a fit for where he was playing in Ottawa's lineup. And I think that's a huge part of it too. But like I've while you were talking, I was just kind of searching Puckpedia right now, just looking at some of the prospective free agents for defense and right defense, and there's not
Not a
anything.
lot.
There's nothing of consequence there. So it
Maybe
puts
trade
Ottawa in a
route.
tough spot. So maybe it's a trade route. And like we talked about Giroux's impending free agent status. We've talked about Zetterland. Like I don't know. Like when Kachuk comes back, who obviously Zetterland's got to move off the first line with Timmy. But like where do you put Zetterland? Do you put him on the fourth line? If you put him on the fourth line, who's your
I,
natural scratch? Obviously, like in my opinion, it's Highmore, but then that raises the question about well, okay, well Highmore's there on the second penalty kill unit. So
mhm.
who's coming in on the penalty kill then?
In my opinion, it would be Tim Stützle. Like he looked really good when he was on the PK earlier in the season and preseason. And I think he just, you look at the Leafs, they put Marner and Matthews, their PK is pretty good. And they can obviously score some shorties as well. I just think he's a puck on a he loves to steal pucks. He has the pace and he's a great skater, which really helps for the diamond formation when you're kind of reading, reacting, and chasing guys and staying in your zone. And I think just he'd be my guy. But maybe to answer your first question, I think Claude Giroux's spot in in this lineup is really interesting because in a lot of ways, you can put him kind of wherever, but he's known for being like he's been a top six player since he got into the NHL, right? And I think transitioning closer to a middle six guy, right? And but you have that Greg Pinto Amadio line that just seems like perfect for like that shutdown line in the playoffs, right? And I don't know if you want to break it up, but if you don't break it up, then are you putting Zetterlund on the fourth line? He doesn't seem super conducive to that type of role, in my opinion. I think he's big enough in the
Uh,
body.
so I kind of disagree because I think like he's a very straight line player. He's not afraid
Yeah,
of being physical. Is he the biggest guy? No, but
but he's physical.
low center of gravity can skate and he's willing to hit. So I think like you can coach if you just say, listen, you're here for secondary scoring depth, go out and hit people and just do your thing, try and get a cycle going and be productive in that way. Like, don't worry about the offense. Just go ahead, hit people, and do your thing. Like, I think like
Hmm.
I think he can be comfortable and coached into doing that.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I don't know. Is like a fourth line of Cousins, like Nick Cousins, I'm assuming will be healthy for the postseason. Like,
Hmm.
is a Cousins got at Zetterlund line that bad? I don't think it is. Like, I think it's
I
got
like
an
it.
opportunity to play. It's got a little bit of everything. Like, you got two guys who can shoot the puck and create offense. And Nick Cousins, I think, was playing at a relatively high level for him before his injury. Obviously, it's going to take him time to adjust and get back to playing. But I don't know. That line's got a little bit of agitation there too.
Yeah.
So I don't
I,
think it's
I
that bad.
also I
It's
also
possible.
wonder if that Perron Cousins Batherson line stays together because it seems like it's being uplifted for tonight's game against Montreal. We'll see. Travis Green is notorious for not wanting to divulge anything about his lines and basically saying, if you ask about line combination, he says, "Well, I can change it at any time." It's like, well, so but I
Even in
think it's
game, right?
interesting.
Like you see that a lot where guys like after
And
penalty kills and
I like
everything,
his
like he'll
in-game adjustments. Like I want to be clear, like I like the fact that he mixes and matches when things aren't going well. I think that's way better than just like, punching the wall until it fucking breaks, right? Like you want that ability to think on the fly, make adjustments. And I think he's done a pretty good job of that. But I think that's just an interesting wrinkle. Like if Dylan Cousins isn't playing well with that line, which if you look at their analytics, their first five games were great. The last couple have been really bad. Um, what do you do? Like who plays with Cousins? I still think DP is probably a good player with him, just with like the board battles, being able for Cousins to find him, just being two heavy guys in the corner.
Mhm.
Um, And but I like Drake with Timmy. Could you go Brady, Timmy and Drake? I think that line would really work. But then, do you want Giroux on that line with Perron? I think they're probably too slow. So I think it's just a lot of interesting machinations heading into the playoffs because they basically have 10 forwards that can all be somewhere in the uh, s- top nine, but
Mhm.
one's going to drop out, and then what's the domino from that too?
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting because they did have like Perron with Stützle and Batherson yesterday, and then Zetterlund with Cousins and Drew. So, are they gonna go with that? I don't know.
Yeah.
But like, I don't. You got 4 games left to experiment. Like, if a line's not going, I like the fact you didn't touch the third line, but like, if your top 2 lines aren't creating enough and you're not happy with it, like, throw it in the blender. Like,
Yeah.
you have 4 games left. If you can get some mojo and chemistry working right before the postseason, then have at it. But again, Brady Kachuk's coming back, right? Like Steve
Yeah.
Sao said in his availability the other day, if the playoffs started tomorrow, essentially, or the next
It was
day.
interesting though. I did ask him yesterday. I was like, "Do you expect to play game one?" And he's like, "Well, I basically it would take a lot for me to miss a playoff game." But he didn't say yes, which was interesting. But I'd be shocked if he doesn't play game one of the playoffs. But I
Yeah.
guess you never know. I guess my question to you, like to move a little bit to the playoffs, who do you think's a better matchup for the Senators? Do you think it's Toronto or Washington? As it seems unlikely at this point it'll be Tampa, but that could be a
Yeah.
wrinkle too.
I don't think it really matters. I like to me, I don't differentiate much between the two. I think like with Toronto, I think the one thing that Toronto has that Washington doesn't is baggage. Like I think there's just so many playoff demons. Not necessarily from a Senators Leafs perspective, because like obviously they have their history, the Battle of Ontario history, but like there is so much pressure on the Toronto market to win. It's Mitch Marner's last year of his
Almost.
contract,
Yeah.
and and John Tavares, same thing. Like there are a lot of moving pieces in Toronto where it's like if this team flounders again, like that's it. It's likely that's it. This is gonna be the last iteration of that core. And if they don't win now, they're gonna blow it up. But like, I think like goaltending wise, like I think Logan Thompson is battling an injury right now, but like Anthony Stollers has put up some spectacular numbers in the games that he's played. Obviously, some injuries impacted the
And
number of
Wolf
games that
too.
he's played.
For
Yeah,
Wolf too. Yeah.
and they've played at a really high level. So like goaltending, I think Toronto's probably a little bit better that way than Washington. I am curious about whether this Ovechkin thing is like air being let out of the balloon. They've been celebrating it for the past, it feels like 2 weeks.
Hmm.
This chase and everything that's going on, it feels like it's just been I'm worrying about whether there's going to be like any emotional letdown for those guys now that it's over. And I do like the fact that like a guy like Ryan Leonard was added to their team, just in
Hmm.
terms of like a young, potentially
Super.
impactful young player who could add some enthusiasm and talent to that lineup. But like they're dealing with some injuries as well, and I think like from a speed perspective, from a defensive perspective, I think they're probably the worst team, even though like obviously they're ahead in points and everything else. I think like they've just benefited uh significantly from the fact that they have one of the highest shooting percentages in the league. They have one of the best save percentages in the league. Um, and when you're talking about playing across a small sample size, if you don't have those two things going for you and you get a little bit unlucky, it's over. And I think with Washington, like they're a less scary 5-on-5 team potentially than Toronto. But even in looking at Toronto's metrics, like their expected
They're
goal
not.
data isn't particularly strong either. So
No.
I don't think either of those teams is like a world beater per se. And
No.
like obviously they're both going to be tough matchups regardless because it's the postseason. Every team's good, every team's strong. But at the same time, it's like it's a small sample size, and Ottawa can play well and beat both those teams easily.
Yeah, like I really feel like maybe it's because I cover the Sens and know those teams better than Toronto and Washington, but I really feel like it's almost a pick 'em in those both those series for the Senators. Like if they had played Florida or Tampa, I would have been like, you know what? If everything goes right, I could see the Senators winning the series. Like Allmark stellar, their special teams does well. Maybe Timmy and Brady kind of start to finish a little bit more than they have. But it felt like it was like any playoff series. There's any team can beat any team because of the small sample size, but I feel like if they play Toronto and Washington as you highlighted, maybe Toronto's 55-45 and same with Washington, but I really feel like Ottawa's like right there. And I would be shocked if they lost in 4 or 5 games in those series. Now, if they played Tampa or Florida, I'm like, okay, yeah, that could happen. So I think the mere fact that we're on, unless somehow Toronto completely, uh, shoots themselves in the foot, they're going to win the division, and it's going to be either Washington or Toronto in the playoffs. So for Ottawa, so I think if you're a Sens fan, you're like, great, don't have the toughest matchup in the first round. And the one thing I also said that I think, maybe I'm getting too ahead of myself, but I think if you want to be in one bracket, you want to be in the Washington bracket. Like as good as Carolina is, I just don't believe that team has like a really good playoff team. I don't trust their goaltending. They're not really big. They're very fast. Like they're completely made for the regular season. But I think how they translate to playoff hockey isn't maybe the best, and you've seen that how they've struggled a little bit in the playoffs. So you play Washington, beat them, then you go into Carolina, you have a pretty good chance, and then you're in the Eastern Conference Finals. But if you play the Leafs, that's going to be just like so much emotion, so much going in that series. And then you play Tampa or Florida, it's like it's going to be tough. So a part of me is kind of like, yeah, I don't mind if they were to fall to the second wild card spot. But either way, I think just the fact that they're not playing the Florida teams, I think is such a huge advantage for them and means that I think they're going to be have a really good chance of making some noise in the playoffs.
I'm curious though, like if it winds up being Toronto, like I think like you and I have talked off air about just the media factor, the whirlwind. Like
It's going to
the
be there.
Toronto media will be like overwhelming, and the national attention and everything else will be overwhelming. But I think like the one thing about Ottawa's young kids right now is I think that they would relish the opportunity
Oh,
to be in that moment. They're not afraid of the limelight. I think like they have no control over what happened in the past. I mean, you're talking about playoff series that were like 20 years ago, like has no bearing. Like not many people, with the exception of like Daniel Alfredson and Cyril Leader, like there's nobody in the organized. There are very few people in
Travis
it.
Green.
Yeah, on the other side of it, but I just mean
Yeah.
like people who are there for the losing. Like there's not many people left who have connections to those series from years past. And I think like this is the kind of team that has like that swagger and moxie and kind of just the right attitude where it'd be like I think they'd be more than willing to be the ones that kick open that door and put on a show.
This isn't reporting, but this is maybe like pure vibes. Like just talking to guys, being in the room when they play Toronto. I think I think if you gave them truth serum, they would say they'd like do anything to play Toronto in the first round. Because I think, for as much as Ottawa's, I think over the next couple of years and this year is almost dispelling that like little brother syndrome. Like, oh my God, like, can we get any attention? Can this team win? Like, oh no, like the sky's always going to fall. But I think for the players, like, I think if you ask Tim Stützle, the way he talks about beating Montreal and Toronto, like, he's just like giddy, right? Same with Brady Tkachuk. And you look at their numbers and they've been phenomenal against those two teams. So, um, in my opinion, if they play Toronto, they'll have absolutely no pressure. Um, all the pressure is going to be on Toronto. Every win and every little like, will feel like you're conquering the mountain top and you're David and they're Goliath, right? And I think they'll feel that too in the Washington series, but not with the same kind of emotional investment and just all the attention. So I think for them, Toronto would be a great matchup. They might lose that series. I don't think that they're for sure going to win. But I think one team is going to be super motivated, super giddy, excited, and I don't think Toronto's going to be like, yeah, I want to play the Sens. Maybe
Mhm.
they want to play them more than Tampa Bay or Florida. I think that's a very fair reason, but just all in all, I don't think they're like, oh, and I don't think they get up the same way for that team. So I think it's a really ideal matchup for the Senators.
Yeah, I just for me, it's like how healthy is Austin Matthews? I think that plays a large part of it. Can they match Ottawa's physicality and like go to the dirty areas of the ice? Like those are the kind of questions that I have about Toronto. Like I think their blue line, Oh, so I like the Brandon Carlo addition for them at the deadline. I think that was the kind of guy I'd love to see in Ottawa get. Um,
Hmm.
like this offseason obviously wouldn't have happened in season, but like
Yeah.
that was the kind of player that I would have loved to see Ottawa target. But they just
They're
don't. I don't find them imposing. Like they're not. And this is the question. It's like very skilled team with their big guys, but like, do they go to the when the going gets tough? Like the knock on Mitch Marner is like he just doesn't go to the dirty areas of the ice enough. When things get congested in the postseason, and like there's the ice is smaller, and if you're just going to play on the perimeter, then teams will be happy to take that trade off. So
yeah.
and with Washington, I think like you look at their lineup and it's like, okay, so if Protas is hurt, their number one center is like Ryan Strome,
Dylan.
who's sorry, Dylan Strome, sorry,
No,
Dylan
it's good.
Strome, and it's like it,
He's a good player.
good player in his own right, but like not a number one center who can dominate games, take games over. And I think like they're just like I just don't find them, although they are physically big physical team. They got some nice pieces like Connor McMichael, obviously like Ovi, Tom Wilson, like they have some big players, but like I don't find them that threatening. I don't find them a very
And
fast team. And I think
and
like where Ottawa succeeds often is against teams that aren't fast, like that like play with pace and everything else. And I just don't find Washington is that team. So it's I don't know.
and
It's a coin
they're
flip for me. Like I don't personally have a preference. I think Ottawa can handle both teams. It's just a matter of
yeah.
going in and executing and getting it done.
Yeah, that I think that's, I think I essentially said it, but unless Tampa Bay somehow wins the Atlantic Division, which is quite unlikely, but still slightly plausible, um, I think Ottawa's in the first round is going to have a real puncher's chance, and that's going to be super exciting because I was a bit worried, like as you mentioned to begin the podcast, it's like, oh well, what if they lose in 4 or 5 games? Like it'll really feel like they've popped the balloon a little bit out of all the momentum this team has brought to the city and to the fan base and everything like that. And I just find it pretty unlikely that that were to happen at this point, where they don't at least go out in style at the very least. And I'm for me, like maybe I'm this is probably going to be what everyone's saying in a week from now, but holy, like watching Brady Kachuk at the Four Nations, like how much like that doesn't that just give you so much hope and inspire so much confidence in you if you're a Sens fan or the Senators, like this guy can dominate against the best of the best when it really matters. And he was one of the 3 or 4 best players on the ice with the best, I don't know, 20 of the best 30 players in the world, right?
Yeah,
And
and I think
so,
I wouldn't even just just say that that's exclusive to Kachuk. Like I think like to this group's credit, like when the stakes have mattered most and they need a win to stop a losing streak because like important games against divisional rivals are coming up, they've found ways to win like those important games, like New Jersey a couple weeks ago. And it's just like I there's those moments where they like elevate, and I think like Dave Perron talked about this this past week. He's been telling guys he likes the fact that the like, Ottawa, regardless of who they play, will open on the road. Like get out of the city, get away from the attention, everything else here, and like
mhm.
and I think like all the
And
pressure
you,
is going to be on Toronto. All the pressure is going to be on Washington because they are the higher seeded teams. And if Ottawa can win game one in Toronto or game one in
oh,
Washington
I
and put
was
like all
thinking
the
the same
pressure,
thing.
it's going to be they're playing with house money, Alex. Like they're gonna be so excited. There's gonna be so much youthful exuberance, and I'm hoping that happens. That would be such a blessing to see like
Yeah.
Ottawa Ottawa find a way to win game one.
And and the other thing, like we haven't really talked about it, and I mean that game 3 is gonna be unbelievable in Audible, where I think it's just gonna be I'm just so excited, just the fact that I'm gonna be in the building for that and covering that game. Like I feel the chills and just like not that I'm, cheering for the Sens necessarily, but just to be in the building to see like the excitement, the city, we both guys, well, you're a Carp guy, but I'm an Ottawa guy. Kidding, but
Prior to city amalgamation, man, come on.
I know, I
It's
know,
been
I
that way
know.
since like what 2005. Like, come
Yeah,
on.
well, not when I was born. You were a Carp guy. But just the enthusiasm in the building is going to be unbelievable, and this team's been a really good home team, right? And if you steal a game on the road, maybe two, but at least one, and you come home, I think they have a good chance like going up 3-1 in a series, and then you're right there, right? And this team's really thrived at home, and I still don't really understand like just like analytically like what like it can't just be the last change. Like I think it has a for some teams that's a bigger advantage than others. I think like for Edmonton, Colorado, that's a huge difference compared to maybe the Senators. But um, yeah, if this team can split, get home, be in a really good position, I think they can, you know, kind of take a stranglehold in any series they're in, right? And they played both Toronto and Washington very well. The one thing that kind of holds me back from being feeling more definitive is again, I'm going to put my Jets fan hat on. They beat Colorado 8-0 before the playoffs last year, and then Colorado just ran around them. And the one thing is like they don't have that playoff experience outside of a couple guys, right? And like what does Ridley Gregg look like? Like does he get, he can always get underneath guys' skin, but is he taking dumb penalties? And I'm not saying this is going to happen, but there is another world where their youth really goes against them. In my opinion, that's probably if they keep going farther in the playoffs where they're just overmatched. They play Tampa Bay or Florida who just know how to win and they're not at that level yet. But I think against Toronto or Washington, I don't think that will really be the case, but you never know.
I think the one thing that works in their favor is I don't think this team's afraid of anything. Like I think like the
No.
mental makeup and strength and resiliency of this team is like they're not afraid. I think like the vets that they've added, whether it's a closure or Dave Perron, Michael Amadio, guys who've been there and gone through it, like they have that makeup and they're guys that they can lean on in those moments. And I don't think this team's afraid of anything, to be honest with you. I think
No,
there's like
like
there's great ownership from the players and coaching staff and like I don't think this team's like I would say this team's fearless in a certain sense where like they're just I don't think they're gonna get I hope they're not overwhelmed in the moment. But I just feel confident in saying that I would be shocked if they're flat, they come out overwhelmed and they're just kind of chasing their tail a little bit early on.
can I ask you, like, why do you think this core seems to be way different? The way it plays, the fearlessness that it felt like in the past that this team would just wilt under the pressure. And it's the regular season, and you're right. Like it seems like they always win the big game, right? This so far this year, where it's against Detroit, New York, whatever, or they're on a losing streak. But why do you think that's changed so much? Is it just maturity? What do you think, in your opinion, Graham?
I think it's a little bit of everything. I think like it starts with the coaching. I think it goes back to last year under Jacques Martin where he was preaching the details. Like he there was that one anecdote where it's like he walked into the room and told the guys like as soon as he's hired, he's like, you guys are playing a certain style. You will never win if you
Yeah.
continue to play this way. And
Yep.
like I think how many times would you see a puck get turned over by the opposition inside the Senators' defensive end and see like two or three forwards just jailbreak, just gone. And
All the
then
time.
the puck doesn't get cleanly moved out, and then all of a sudden you've got three guys deep down the ice, and the opposition just tic-tac-toe back goal. It
Yep.
happens all the time. And I think like it's a combination of factors. I don't think it's like I wouldn't point to any one
No.
thing, but I think it's like goaltending. Goaltending is obviously a marked improvement from previous years. I think there is a desire on the part of the players, especially the young core, to win, to get better. Um, I think Travis Green is different from DJ Smith. He's not a player's coach necessarily. I think like he's
He's
if
a
you're not doing what you need to be doing in terms of like um the paying attention to the details of the game, the small details, and um, if you're ducking coverage, if you're not playing and performing at a high level, like he's going to call you out. Like Thomas Chabot said that when I talked to him last week, like the coaching staff has given them direction and instruction. If you're not doing the job, they're gonna let you know, and it's not necessarily going to be the easiest thing for players. But they recognize it, they understand it, and that's what they need to hear and follow up on and act on if they're going to win. I think there is that maturity level that you mentioned. I think they're all in it together. I think that's another part of it that we just don't talk about. Like they've been doing this for a few years now, and it's like you talk you talk again, you talk to Thomas Shabbat, the fact that like they're all pulling on the rope in the same direction, it makes him excited. Like he feels like there's a genuine enthusiasm for like what this group has done. And they kind of understand it's like, hey, we're all in this together. We're all working together. And I guess there's probably some personal accountability. Like they're accountable to their teammates, right? And I think they all want this so badly that it's certainly helped.
I think there's a time, it was interesting. I remember Shabbat last year being like, yeah, I want to be coached hard after like in his exit media availability after the season. And I wrote this, or I don't know, I haven't wrote this yet, but I talked to Tim Stützle and I asked him just about he isn't scoring at the rate as he did a couple of years ago, and why is that happening? And he said to me, I used to have a bunch of breakaways a game, but he didn't say he was cheating, but he's like, now I'm making sure like I'm not just like fly by and leaving the zone before we get the puck out, right? And I think it's just at a certain point, you come into the league, you want to put up fancy stats, you want to get the contract. They've all got paid, right? They've all, hit career highs, everything. And now they're like, yeah, but I don't have a freaking playoff game under my belt and it sucks to lose, right? And, they're all still very young, but they're not 20 anymore. They're 22, 23, 24, 25, right? And I think, once you're in the league for an extended period of time and you're not winning, you're like, well, what, like, what am I doing right now? Right? Like, think about if Brady Tkachuk had not made the playoffs this year or next year, right? The whole narrative would be like, well, why doesn't he win? And then you see you're at 500 games like Shabbat and Tkachuk, and you're like, oh my God, like my career's almost over and I haven't even played a meaningful game. So, I think they were in a position to be coached hard and they were kind of on that curve of development where it was like, okay, like who freaking cares if I get 40 goals? But if we don't make the playoffs, it sucks, right? And I don't know if they would have been there 2, 3 years ago. And I think they're finally in that position. And, a huge credit to them because I feel like every single player on this team has bought into playing defensively. And that just was not the case the last 2, 3 years, right?
Hmm.
And you look at Brady Tkachuk. There's been like I can think of like 5 moments this year where late in the game he makes a great block or a steal or a clear. And I watched this team in the past couple of years. I don't remember him like one defensive moment of Brady Tkachuk, right? Look
Yep.
at Tim Stützle, the way he hustles back, the way he intercepts pucks. Just he's so tenacious defensively, not
Hmm.
just offensively. And I don't really remember that the past couple of years. And even Drake Batherson, like I remember at the beginning of the year, he was just deflecting a bunch of point shots. I was like, I don't remember Batherson getting lanes and having using his stick, in a good way. So
I don't want to interrupt you, but one of the things David Perron mentioned when I talked to him this past week. I'm trying to if it was last week or this week. I guess it doesn't really matter. But he mentioned when you have guys like him, like a Michael Amadio, who are so good at going into like one-on-one board battles and just like jockeying stick position, using their body to shut like shield, protect the like pucks, create space for themselves to get the puck back and create body position on the opposition. I think like when you see guys that do that consistently, who aren't necessarily the skill guys. We see guys who are brought in do that consistently and win like those one-on-one battles, and that just permeates a culture. All of a sudden, guys pay attention to it and be like, "Oh shit!" Like that's what I need to do, and it just kind of organically grows
yeah,
and becomes like part of a team's identity. And I like how many times this year have you and I been at a game and we're like, "Man, when's the last time you saw the Ottawa like defend that well with their sticks?" Or like
yeah,
battle like that and compete for the loose pucks and win one-on-one battles as often as they have been. And I just like I think it's a testament to the veterans that they've added. I think it's like
yeah,
those fits that we talked about earlier in the show. I think it's contagious. It's infectious. You want to have guys like that. And I think that getting that mindset ingrained and indoctrinated in the minds of the young core has helped. And I think like the guys like Brady, Timmy, Drake, it's you see it, you see that growth defensively on that side of the puck, and it's encouraging. And I think like this team's only going to go as far as this young core takes it. I think if you can
yeah,
continue to grow that young group's defensive side of the game, I think offensively. we've seen it, like not just this season, but previous years. Like this team has a lot of offensive firepower. Um, they just needed to work on the defensive side of the game, and I think to their credit, they've done that. It's just
Yeah,
now we're saying, okay, guys, but you still have to score. You have
yeah.
to produce offensively as well. And I think like, they've had their shortcomings with their shooting percentage and everything this year, but I think that's what they have to address in the offseason. I think they
Yeah,
need a little. You mentioned like Nick Ehlers earlier in the show. I think like they need like
like a
another
top
skilled
six.
top
Yeah,
six guy who can fill in it a little bit, and then you can have conversations later about like Zetterlund and Claude Giroux and Fitz and what do you
I
want to
like
do long
Zetterlund
term.
a lot. I'm on the Zetterlund bandwagon, but I completely agree. And it's interesting. I had an interview with Kachuk before the season, and he said to me, I want to be like a shutdown guy, and I still remember my initial reaction was like, "What?" Like that's funny. Like that's I get you're saying that, but like you don't like nothing would suggest that he could be even close to a shutdown guy. And if you look at his defensive metrics, they're impeccable. I don't know if that's all that way. Like I don't feel like you put out Kachuk to like hold on to a lead because of his defensive aptitude.
But
But
I think that's
but
probably what he's trying to say, right? Like he wants to be one of those guys that a
no
coach can
no
put out there in the
no no
last
no
minute
but
of a game.
no
Like
no but no no but that what I was gonna say is like but he has transformed into a guy that just felt like he was cheating for offense all the time to a guy that is a markedly good defensive hockey player that plays the right way. And I think that's kind of how you see how much they came in with one goal, play better winning hockey, specifically on the defensive end. And they've essentially lived up to that, right? And the team is not winning games because they're great offensively. They're winning because they play the right way defensively. And when your stars buy in, when you have Michael Amadio and David Perron like showing the way, like how to win board battles, to like hustle, like Amadio is just he's one of my favorite players on this team just because he, as you said, like Mark Stone-esque, he'll just like pickpocket guys all the time. And he just has that extra effort, and I think it's infectious, like to have a weird metaphor, like I played basketball at like not a high level, but just in a lot of rec leagues. And if you have one guy that's not playing defense, it just screws up everything else because no one else feels that kind of um, you know, the that almost vigor, like that necessity to like play defensive and be on everyone and swarm. But when everyone's swarming at the same time, it just you almost have like a high of playing defense. And I wonder if that's kind of what's translated into the Senators, where there was always a couple guys like a Dadonov, a Tarasenko, just like that would almost like break the system because they weren't good defensive players. And I feel like now there's no clear clearing holes, and then you can play really tight checking good hockey. No offense to those players, but they're just not known for their defensive, you know,
no, and I would say
work.
too, like a fatal flaw of like previous iterations of this team is that the offensive players that they did bring in to play in those wing positions were often like one and out chance players, like whether it's like a Matthew Joseph or like God, like a Tarasenko or anything. Like they would shoot the puck and then it essentially would just be equate itself to a turnover, right?
Yeah,
It's like the opposition freezes the puck, get a face off, or the opposition would just get the puck and go back the other way. And it's a
yeah,
lot of one and out chances. I think it's totally different. I think like David Perron talked about in the preseason. It's just like you need guys who can have those shifts, or it's like you can play for a minute, minute and a half, 2 minutes in the offensive zone, wear down the defense, and just do if you can do that continue through the course of the game. Eventually, the opposition is going to get tired, and that's when you might not necessarily score a goal in those shifts, but like it has residual benefits later in the game when you might be able to take advantage of the T club, and it makes a
yeah.
lot of sense. And it's a different team. I think it's a much different team. So yeah, I'm excited to see what they can do in the postseason. It's just gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun to watch, and I'm eager to see how this team performs, and even just from a lessons learned perspective, like whether they do really well or just don't live up to it and eventually like lose a series. I just I want to see this team learn and to take something valuable from the experience. I would hate to see a four and out where they just don't give a good representation of how they perform this year on the whole. Um, but I think like for me, the biggest takeaway from this postseason experience is going to be like, what do you take away from it? What's the positive step? Because this team definitely, it's one thing to make the postseason. the goal is to win a Stanley Cup with this group, and you have to keep taking those measured steps. And it doesn't always come linearly, right? But
No.
you still have to take those steps. So
Yeah.
that's the
No.
biggest thing for me.
So to end off, I think you gave me a softball into the segue. How far does this team go, in your opinion?
Oh, I could see them like I could see the first like if they lose, I think it'll be in game 6 or 7. If they win, I could see them winning in 5 or 6. Um, and then yeah, it's just a matchup perspective. Like you and I have talked about this. It seems like Ottawa does struggle against fast teams. So like if they're in the Washington side of things and they play Carolina, for example, like that could be a tough matchup just based off speed alone.
Yeah.
But I also think like Ottawa plays that style that hasn't necessarily been conducive to success in the postseason as well. So maybe Ottawa can steal that
Yeah.
series as well. And I don't think it'll be a very physically taxing series, which would work in their favor, Ottawa's favor. So I could see them going. I could see them going to the semis or the Eastern Conference Final if everything breaks right. But at the same time, I could also see them losing the first round and being out as
Yeah.
well. So
Uh,
I think if Ottawa advances past the first round, I think you could easily see them make the Eastern Conference Final.
yeah.
But on the flip side of that, I could easily see them getting bounced because if the second and third pairings get taken advantage of, the series is over. Like they desperately need Jensen and Shabbat to play at a high level, and if they can't, then I think Ottawa's chances of advancing 1 or 2 rounds is very, very small.
I completely agree, and I will actually give a prediction.
Oh,
And
screw
I
you.
will no, but I'll say they'll win their first round. I think just with their matchups, I truly believe that, in my opinion, if I was a bookie, I would feel more confident that Ottawa wins those two series and loses it. And then I don't know, as you said, I think Carolina's a really good team. I kind of like Ottawa, but it would be tough. And it feels like Carolina's it's kind of their year with all the Randon stuff. And then I just don't see them, in my opinion, beating Florida or Tampa. It could happen, but I would be surprised to say the least. So in my opinion, I think they'll win their first round matchup just because of I think they match up well against both Washington and Toronto, and then I think they'd probably lose in the second round, which I think would still be a huge stepping stone, and even just one series win. I will
How about
say it will be.
how about we revisit when the actual like brackets are set, and then
Yes,
we'll
that's
talk
I'm gonna
about it.
we're gonna have you on for a playoff preview. That's what we're gonna cement into
Because
stone. But
and the other thing too is like injuries happen and everything else, so it's like
yeah, of course,
stuff could totally change between now
for sure.
and a week from now.
I
So
I will say the part of me that feels very in tune with the fan base can already see like the Senators beating Toronto and everyone saying we've won more playoff series in 1 year since 2017 and obviously this year than Toronto. Like that would be such a freaking like I actually don't mind the Leafs. Like I don't typically like in the playoffs when I was a fan, like I wasn't like cheering against them, but I just found it win or lose, it was funny. Either they climbed the mountaintop and it's like they won the Stanley Cup and that's kind of funny. And then, or they fall apart like against Montreal or Boston every year. So to me, it's a win-win if they were to play each other. And I do want a Canadian team to win the Stanley Cup, even if Sens fans might have daggers for me if I said that about Toronto. But um, I
Alex,
think, yeah,
our trophy ballot thing came out.
yeah, I did.
Massive trophy ballot. Yeah, sorry,
Yep.
interrupted
Oh
you.
yeah, we
I
are we
actually thought we
will
got her. I thought it was. I saw it. I'm like, oh, is this our full awards ballot? But it's not.
no, no. Anyways, I will be voting for I don't know what. I think anyways, we'll go back. I don't think the Sens will be too much on our ballot, so I'm actually kind of thankful for that because I don't want to be a homer. But is there anything else before we transition to making our ballots for the Masterton that and then exit this podcast? Is there anything else you kind of want to say before I end
No, we didn't
this?
really talk about the Montreal game tonight, but like, I'm not. It's to me, it's inconsequential. Like,
No.
I don't think it matters whether Ottawa finishes seventh or
No.
eighth. Doesn't matter.
No, doesn't
Doesn't
matter
matter.
to me. Okay, well, thank you so much, Graham, and hopefully we'll do this again sometime before or during the playoffs. And I'll see you at the rink tonight. And thanks again for joining the show.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks, Alice. Appreciate the time. Thanks for watching, everybody.